Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Goldster conversation. I'm absolutely thrilled today to welcome Marc Woods, Paralympian, amazing swimmer, broadcaster, and executive coach. Welcome to Goldster, Marc.
Thanks for having me.
Have I missed out anything there?
Oh, I'm sure I could put lots of different tags. I'm a dad, but
Your dad?
they're endless, aren't they?
Yeah, trying to encapsulate your life into one little bit. So, what people probably first knew you for was your swimming. So I really want to talk about when you first fell in love with swimming and when you knew you wanted to be a professional.
Okay. Well, I learned to swim when I was 4. My father worked as an air sea rescue winchman on a helicopter.
Oh, wow.
So we learned to swim, myself and my brother, we learned to swim because it was a life skill. We live on an island surrounded by water. We should all learn to swim. That was
Absolutely.
my dad's view. The fact that I became a good swimmer afterwards was kind of neither here nor there to him. Oh, he's proud of me, but it was the life skill was the most important thing. I've still got my 10-meter badge. In fact, I've probably got it down here. If I look, I've got my
Your
10-meter
very
badge.
first swimming badge.
My very first swimming badge. I will find it and show it to you before we finish. But yeah, it's my 10-meter badge, and it was the biggest moment really in my swimming career. I think is that moment when you learn to swim. But yes,
Yeah.
I love swimming. I was a lazy county swimmer as a teenager, though. I was one of these kids who I just thought I was great at whatever
Yeah.
thing I did, but I was never going to be better than a county swimmer. But then I got diagnosed with a bone cancer when I was a teenager, an osteosarcoma, and that meant that I had to have my leg amputated, and that gave me a bit of a kick and made me think about what I wanted to do in life, and made me it made me consider how long do I have left to live. Do I have 6 years, do I have 60 years? I don't know, but I realized I wanted to try and be good at something, and because I'd already been reasonably good at swimming, swimming seemed like a good thing to attempt to be good at, and I started training properly and became quicker with one leg than before when I had two. um,
Yeah. What
and
was that process like? Was it like relearning to swim, trying to swim with one leg as opposed to two?
No, no, it wasn't too bad. I mean, obviously, I had to relearn to walk. That was quite a big thing. Walking on an artificial limb for the first time, and learning to do it without limping, and changing your gait. But in terms of swimming, it wasn't so bad. I mean, I was like I say, a reasonable standard swimmer. Technically, I was good. So the adjustments in the water are relatively small. I'm kicking with one leg rather than kicking with two. It was more to do with the technical things around the swimming, so like the start of a race or the turn. That needed more adjustment, but the actual swimming itself, it was more of a balancing thing. Didn't take too long.
And so when did you get asked to be part of Team GB?
So what happened was I got diagnosed with my cancer as a 17. About 6 months later, I was already quicker with one leg. I
Wow.
went to the British Swimming Champs. Actually, my father entered me into the disabled swimming championships before I even had my leg amputated. That you can imagine that as a conversation, and it was because he'd he just wanted to do something that was positive for me. I think
Mhm.
when you're
Yeah.
when you're a parent and you're responsible for your child's well-being, but when they become really sick, that is removed from you, and
Yeah.
the health service take over. So that him entering me into the swimming championships was a way of saying you're going to come out of this. Let's plan for something that you can do afterwards. So I went to that first national swimming championships and won some things at that. And I missed out on going to the European Championships. So almost straight away, I was still in the middle of my chemotherapy. It was a good
Right.
thing that I
Yeah.
didn't go to European
Yeah.
Championships. Um, and then, so it was 18 months after. So I was not just I was 18, 19 when I went to the Paralympic Games in 1988.
And what was that like?
Well, I mean, I'm from Grimsby. Okay, it's it's not the most exotic place in the world. I mean, it is what it is. We all come from our own places, don't we? And but to go to Seoul in '88, having not long become an amputee, representing my country for the first time, having just gone to university and done 1 month at university. But no, I basically did Freshers Week, and then I left and went to compete in Seoul. That whole experience was incredible, and a great opportunity for me to almost give back to my family in some ways. They'd helped me through a tough time. Me going there and doing well at that competition was a nice reward for everybody, I think. Come out the other end of it all.
And what was Seoul like? I mean, I've still not been there, and it's somewhere I'd love to go to. What did it feel like going to somewhere so completely different?
I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. I can still say thank you, and that's the only thing. 감사합니다 is the only thing that I can say in Korean, but it is a little while ago now. I mean, I loved it. I mean, the people were very kind and generous. There was some challenges around there at that time with the in '88. There was still some challenges around the amount of money that was spent on the Olympics and Paralympics, and there were some protests around there. But they embraced the Paralympics, and every time there's a Paralympic Games, there's a sense that the community that are hosting it go through a moment of revolution in terms of how they view disability. I think we experienced that in London 2012, where the Paralympics suddenly was a big thing, and that moment of revolution for how people view disability in the UK was a really positive thing.
And do you think that has stayed? Because I was a volunteer at the Olympics in 2012. It's the only time I've been to an Olympics was London in 2012, and thought it was absolutely extraordinary. Do you think that the Paralympics effect actually works long term, or do you think that people start to forget again?
I think that the profile of the Paralympics has stayed to a certain degree. If I think back to '88 when I first swam, people didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
Has the impact been as broad and as deep as we would have liked it to have been? Then the answer is probably no. We still see, we still know that people with disabilities, disabled people, I should say, are more likely to not be able to find work, are less likely to get the health care that they maybe need. So awareness of Paralympic sport, yes. Shift in societal behaviour, less so, I think.
And do you think that it's encouraging more disabled people to take up sport in the first place? Is that one positive for the Paralympics, or is it not really having a huge impact in that way?
I think it does in that moment in time, but you have to have the infrastructure to enable it to happen. So if a 10-year-old disabled person watches the Paralympics and is inspired to take part in sport, that's great. And I'd like to think we do that. But if there isn't the infrastructure and the facilities and the coaching and the teaching available to that 10-year-old, then that inspiration is then wasted and nothing happens. So there's more than that one element of inspiring somebody. There has to be the capability within whichever society you live in to access the sport.
So if we take you back to before your amputation, when you were first learning to swim, and as you said, being very arrogant, thinking I'm great, what was your training schedule like? What did your parents have to do to get you to that point that you were swimming at a county level?
It was. I mean, it felt hard then, even though it was nothing like what I did when I was swimming internationally. But at a county level, I was still doing maybe 5 swimming sessions an evening, maybe 1 swimming session in a morning, or maybe 2 a week. So that was partly to do with the fact that the club where I grew up wasn't a national standard club at the time. So there wasn't the number of hours that I might have needed to be better. I didn't have to do quite as many early mornings as you hear about from some young swimmers.
Yeah.
When I became an international swimmer and I was training in London or various places around the country, then it becomes very different. Getting up at 20 to 5 in the morning, swimming from 5:30 to 7:30, recovering, going to the gym, doing an hour and a half at the gym at lunchtime, doing another 2 hours of swimming in the evening. That is brutal. And for the parents of young people that are doing that, that's hard work. When you're taking your child swimming at 5:30 in the morning, getting them to school, and then going and doing a full day of work, and then taking them swimming again in the evening. It's a big commitment for the parents.
Huge commitment for the parents. So am I right that you have got, now I may have got this wrong, 12 Paralympic medals and
That's
21
correct.
from World and European Championships? Is that right?
That is correct, Lucinda.
Ah.
Very good. You've done your research.
I've looked on your website. But tell us what it was like. So what was your very first Paralympic medal for?
So in Seoul, I won 2 golds, a silver, and 2 bronze medals, and it was incredibly exciting. I mean, I like sport, I like racing, so I could get excited about swimming well and being successful in a competition at any time. But at the games, it feels really special. I then didn't win another gold medal for another 12 years. I mean, I went to other games and I won medals at each games that I went to, but it wasn't until 2000 that I won another gold medal, and that felt very, very different because of the investment in time that I put in. The Paralympic Games was improving all the time, and to try and stay ahead of that curve and still be competitive, times that tend to win you a gold medal at one games will only just get you into a final the following games.
Right.
So you've got to all the time be improving. So to still stay ahead of that curve and win a gold medal in Sydney was a huge moment. But to use a quote that you'll be well aware of, it was the best of times and worst of times. I forgot that right way around. Is it the other way around? Worst of times, best of times.
The best of times, it was the worst of times. You got it.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Sorry, I knew I'd mess it up. Because at the same time, 2 weeks before I went to Sydney, my father passed away. He had a stroke. And it'd been my coach the first 2 games, and then he was my number 1 fan. And so going to Sydney, being successful there with the team, part of a relay, but also so soon after my father passing away, that was brutally hard. It's the medal that I share with and show people most when I go.
Let's see it. Great.
So this is the gold medal from Sydney. Hold it the right way up, if I can get it. There we go.
Oh wow! How amazing to see that. So
and people say to me, "Why are you showing a silver medal?" And this isn't a silver medal. It looks silver now. And if I compare it to the one I've got, one here from Athens, how the difference in colour there.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
They are all made slightly differently, but they don't make solid gold medals anymore. They make solid silver medals, and they plate them in gold. And because I for a long while I did the speaking circuit, I was doing over 100 speeches a year for years and years. And I would take my medal and I would let people like yourself have a little hold of the medal, a little feel, and then everybody goes hold with gold on their hand, and I go home with a silver medal. But yes, that's why it looks a little bit silver, that one.
Bet your children must love that. They just like want to play with the medals, get them out and look at them and say, "My dad."
Well, it's funny. My daughter's nearly 14, my son's nearly 11, and I haven't overly talked to them about my swimming career particularly. They know what I've done. They know now, but I can remember my daughter finding a gold medal. She was rooting through a bag of mine when she was about 3 or 4, and she went, "Oh, Daddy, look, a gold medal!" I'm like, "I know, isn't it amazing?"
Sweet.
So and then when because I do commentary and presenting at the Paralympic Games. In fact, I can see the heads of the microphones that I've got here.
Oh yeah.
Don't tell the sound engineers that I take one of those as a souvenir at the end of the competition. When my kids would see me on TV, then that was when they began to get their head around maybe Dad did do something that was a bit more interesting than just being a dad. When their friends were saying, "I saw your dad on TV," and then they'd be like, "Dad, you didn't tell me he was going to be on TV." I said, "Well, I did tell you I was going to Rio, and there was a swimming competition there." So yeah.
So taking you back to Seoul and Sydney, I want to know what it feels like to win a medal, because you don't know whether you've won. Presumably you're underwater, you don't know what your time is. What is it like, that moment when you realize you're fast?
Yeah, I mean, so sometimes you're aware that you're considerably in the lead, but more often than not, at that level of competition, it's quite close, and you're not 100% aware. And I think that how you feel when you win a medal depends a lot on what's going on in your life at that moment in time and the context behind the, everything that you had to do to achieve that.
Yeah.
So in Seoul, as I said, I wasn't that long after having all my chemotherapy. It was a celebration of being alive and, you know, doing something cool and thanking my family. The one that I shared about in Sydney when my father passed away, you know, it was amazing to win it, and I'd worked so hard, but it's also incredibly sad that my father wasn't there. So it does depend a lot on what's going on. But yeah, so that moment when you first turn around and you look at the scoreboard and you're like, oh, yes, yeah, I've done it. And I can remember when I getting this gold medal in Sydney and walking. When you the structure of swimming pools is that normally there's kind of tunnels or corridors underneath the stands, and they move the athletes around underneath the stands. You don't see them moving around so much. And I can remember walking back from receiving the medal back underneath the stand and just going like this, and then looking at it again and go, yes, a gold one. It's a gold one. Fantastic. Yeah, no, it's a pretty good feeling.
So what is it like on the circuit? Because I always think it's really fascinating when I watch professional athletes. I watch Wimbledon or I watch the Olympics, and I think these are the people you are competing against all the time. And yet they're the people who can understand you like no one else can, because they're the only people who share exactly what you're doing. What is that camaraderie or rivalry really like in the real world?
That's a nice question. I as in every walk of life, there is a variety of people, you know, taking part in any kind of activity. And sometimes people say to me, do you still see your friends? And I'm like, who are you talking about? Those people, they're not my friends. They were people on my team, but the point that I'm trying to make is that there's a variety of people. Some people you get on really well with, some people you hope you never see again. But yes, there's certain moments that do stand out in my mind where I suddenly realise, yes, I'm part of a community. I remember when I qualified to go to Athens in 2004, that was my 5th games. And I qualified at the British Open Swimming Championships, and there was lots of other nations there. And I had swimmers from all the other countries coming up saying to me, Mark, you've made it to your 5th one, fantastic. I'm like, oh, that's nice. That does feel nice. Yeah. So you're right, not until you've been part of a process similar to that, it's hard to fully understand the commitment that you put in and the sacrifices you make. You make a lot of sacrifices.
Yeah. And so when you were asked to be the broadcaster for the Paralympics, how long was it after you'd stopped competing? Did they instantly say, right, this is going to be his last games, we want to grab him for the team? How did that work?
So I ended up, my first thing that I did was in 2002 for the Manchester Commonwealth Games. I wasn't racing at that because there was at the Commonwealth Games we tend to have just some kind of showcase events and not the whole swimming program. My races weren't at the Commonwealth Games, so I got asked to do the commentary for that, which was great. They then immediately asked me to do the commentary for Athens, and I said, well, I'd quite like to swim at Athens. So can we just wait? Well, can you decide what you want to do? Well, can we just see if I can qualify first?
Exactly.
And then we decide. So I swam at that one, and then they picked me up again to do Beijing and done a variety of things. Sometimes it's been commentary. I think that's probably my weakest thing. I tend to either get too excited too early. It's quite often what I do.
I've seen you as a commentator, and I think you're excellent. So I think that's interesting.
Very kind of you, Lucinda. I quite like the punditry, which is like the presenter's friend, where somebody like a Claire Balding will ask me a question and I'll give my opinion. I'm quite happy to give my opinion. But what I did in Tokyo, which is the first time I'd done it, and it was really nice to do because I'd begun to feel quite removed from the athletes themselves. I did what we call mixed zone. A mixed zone is where you stand and you're the first person the swimmer speaks to after they've finished. And so they're still out of breath, they're getting their head around what they've achieved or not achieved, and then you have a conversation with them and capture that those brilliant moments where they're delighted or they're disappointed, and because I've been through it myself, I tend to catch really nice moments.
Yeah.
The swimmers they know I understand, like I said, the
Mm.
sacrifice and how it feels. So they tend to be quite open with me, and I really enjoyed that in Tokyo. So I'm hoping I'm going to do that again in Paris.
And how does it feel to be on that side? When did you feel a sense of relief? Do you always just want to be swimming? What's it like?
I don't always want to be swimming. I mean, myself and Lycra are no longer friends. Um, we don't talk anymore. So no, I'm at a point where I'm quite happy to be on the other side. Um, but I do still feel passionate about um, wanting to get Paralympic sport across in the right way, helping educate people to understand the nuances in the classification, or just and more broadly think about disability in a different way. So I just want the athletes to. I want to create the space for the athletes to be themselves. No, I really enjoy that. I'm happy I'm not in the pool anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew it was time to retire when I could see my eyebrows in front of my goggles. That was the point. I'm like, okay, I should probably think about retiring.
And really, what kind of age do you think most professional swimmers do start to think, or I don't know if you can call yourself professional if you're an Olympian, but working athletes, what age do swimmers start to say, I'm just going to have to give it up, my body's not doing what it was before?
Well, I mean, again, it does vary. I mean, some people struggle with injuries, throughout their career. The fact that there's now lottery money available in the UK has meant that athletes can go on longer because the burden, the financial burden, isn't quite the same. So athletes don't make a lot of money by receiving lottery funding, but it will cover their cost.
Yeah.
So that means people can compete for longer. I wouldn't have been able to go to 5 games if I hadn't have started picking up lottery funding, because I was ranked in the top 3 in the world for a couple of events. It meant that I got lottery funding, and that really enabled me to go to 2 extra games because I was struggling financially. In terms of the physiology of it, to give you a rough idea, I started swimming competitively as a 10-year-old. That's when I joined a swimming club as a 10-year-old. And I spent 21 years trying to get quicker. And then I spent the final 4 years of my career trying to stop getting slower.
Right. Yeah.
So it gets to that just beyond 30 where your body doesn't recover the same, and you have to be really smart about how you're training, because you can feel you literally. I spent those last 4 years where I was trying to stop getting slower. I did what we call PB, personal bests. I did one personal best in that whole 4-year period, and it was by 2/100ths of a second.
Wow.
And I was treading water. So that it's hard there. You occasionally get swimmers who go longer than that, or athletes that go longer than that. But it's normally where there's a high skill level, which they can compensate for the fact that maybe not quite as quick.
Right.
Used to be, or quite as strong.
And do you ever now swim just for pleasure?
At the moment, no, and that's because I have a shoulder issue. This shoulder, well, I calculated approximately how many arm rotations I did throughout my swimming career, based on the fact that I know how many arm rotations it takes me to do 50 meters. I know how many meters I would train every week, how many years that I swam. So
what is that vast figure?
I calculated that in total I did approximately 23 million arm rotations.
Oh my God.
And swimming is a great sport, but that many arm rotations does have some impact.
Yeah.
So this arm currently I can't lift it above my head very well, and because it wants to try and dislocate. My bicep tendon doesn't like sitting in the groove in my shoulder anymore, and when I lift my arm, it tries to slide out. So
ouch.
I need to have that screwed into my shoulder to keep my shoulder in place. So currently, I'm not swimming.
And do you find that really frustrating? Is it something that you kind of so associate with every day, or are you used to not swimming?
that part of my life
Mhm.
is gone now, and I was ready to retire. I loved the job. I'd done enough swimming for a number of lifetimes, and
Yeah.
I miss being fit and healthy. That level of fitness. Um, and I do, if I go away with the family, I want to mess around with the kids. It'd be nice to get my shoulder back into shape to be able to go and do that. But at the minute, it's I just have to be careful with it. It tries to dislocate in my sleep, so I need to get it fixed.
So I just wonder, probably people listening to this or watching today who have family members who are going through cancer, particularly if they might have child family members who are. I just wondered if you could talk to them about what it's like to be that child, and also what family members can do to help cope with it.
Whew, again, I have to be. I take a deep breath for that
Yeah.
question, because I think it's such a personal thing to go through, um, both for the individual with the cancer and for the family. And so generalizing is a dangerous thing.
Mhm.
This is my caveat that I'll put towards that.
Yeah.
Um, that said, I think my experience. Obviously, I was a teenager when I had my first cancer. Recently, I had throat cancer the last 12 months. Um, and my personal experience is that the patient, the person going through it, is often relatively robust. Again, I'm being very careful here, and I know I'm generalising, but I was a trustee for Teenage Cancer Trust for a long while, and building cancer units for teenagers, we'd find that those teenagers would support each other and were pretty robust together. The challenge they found, a lot of teenagers going through cancer, they find that the hardest thing is they feel responsible for their parents' happiness or
Mm,
lack thereof.
of course. Yeah.
And that is a real, can be a real burden for a young person with cancer, or anybody with cancer, is that impact on the people that they care about. And I know that, having gone through it recently again, my main concern wasn't to do with myself. It was to do with how my kids going to be, how my family going to be, are they going to be okay, what impact is going to have on them. I'll deal with what I have to deal with.
Hmm.
Whatever happens, happens. I can't really do much about it, and that's my pragmatic nature. But if I was give one piece of advice to anybody who's in that process with somebody, as a friend or a carer or a parent or a sibling or whatever, I would say the most important thing is to just try and continue to be the person that you were for them before. The most important thing for a parent of a young person is they continue to be a parent.
Hmm.
They might also be a carer, but they've got to be a parent. So
Yeah.
you've got to try and continue to be a friend and not just be a carer. You've got to try and continue to be a sibling and not a carer. And because if as a patient, you desperately need those relationships to remain intact, and that's
Hmm.
quite a hard thing to do, I think.
Yeah. And how long was it after your operation that you were then competing at Seoul?
So I started swimming again after my amputation, 6 days after my amputation. So
Wow.
when I got the stitches out of my leg, I went swimming, um,
Wow, that's
and I
incredible.
started swimming then. Um, and then 6 months I was swimming quicker, and then it was 18 months before I went to Seoul.
Right.
I just missed the European champs, and
Yeah.
yeah, so I had to wait a little while, but yeah.
That's incredible. You were allowed to get back in the water that quickly. That's
I
astonishing.
think there was that as long as I didn't get an infection, because I was in the middle of my chemo still, they
Yeah.
were quite happy for me to do something that made me feel good about myself,
Yeah, of
and
course.
that's important.
Mm. So then, as well as broadcasting, you then became a motivational speaker. Do you want to tell us what a motivational speaker is? And you said you were doing 100 speeches a year pre-COVID. Tell us about
Yeah,
that
I mean,
career, where
it
you
always
went
makes me think of David Brent when you say when people say motivational speaker.
to.
I'd like to think that I managed to do it slightly different to that. Um, I guess my job is that I will go to an event. No, I mean they're not normally corporate events. I have done a lot of events at schools as well, but almost exclusively now do corporate events, and my job there is to bring energy. And there's a number of ways that sports people do the motivational speaking thing, and they either turn up and they say, "Oh, no, great! I've got a gold medal. Cheer for me," which is fine, and people can get excited about that. Or they say, "I did this, and for you to be successful, you need to do these same 5 things," which I think is a little bit patronizing. If you're being a swimmer, you shouldn't really be telling people how to make widgets better. You don't know anything about those widgets. What I like to try and do is I share my story in a way that people can draw parallels to what's occurring in their own lives, whether that's personally or professionally. And obviously I'm paid to do it by a business, so you want to have some parallels to, maybe it's team dynamics, or it's goal setting, or it's agreeing on what success looks like. I will share stories around that are useful. It gives people time to think, because we don't often give ourselves time to think in a work setting. We might have to give ourselves time to think at the weekend or in a personal setting, but in a work setting, people aren't often given time to think, and that's what the corporate speaking circuit and corporate events, I think, is the most valuable thing. Is it gives people time to think and connect with other people, and I help facilitate that through the stories that I share.
Now, you've also written books, I believe.
I have.
I'd love you to
It's funny, Lucinda. You probably saw me before we started. I kept turning around and looking at what was on my bookshelves, because I was acutely aware that I hadn't really thought about what was behind me on my bookshelves.
We can't see the titles, so don't worry.
I can't see any Dickens, and I have got Dickens, but I think it's over there. These are my oversized books, and my other books are around there in alphabetical order. So, but yes, I have written a few books. I've written. This one was my this one is kind of my story plus what other people think about various things. So it's like an entry-level personal development book, So if I talk about motivation, here's how I stayed motivated. Here's what other people think about motivation. Here's what my coach thinks about motivation. So I did that.
And for those people listening on the podcast, the book is called Personal Best.
Thank you, Lucinda, for doing that. I forget that we're not on live television. Yes, it's called Personal Best by Marc Woods. And then I did another one called Beyond the Call. And that it's more of a cultural thing for organizations, about why do some people go the extra mile at work and why do some people not? So why do some people offer great customer service or support their peers, and some people just do the bare minimum? So I did some research with New York University looking at the drivers behind that, what leaders need to do, what businesses need to do to encourage that discretionary effort.
And what kind of conclusions did you come to? Why do some people just let everybody else take the slack?
There's a range of reasons why that happens. Some of it is personality. But there's actually also things that we can control as people responsible for organizations, as leaders. Some of them are how we behave, and some of them are around processes that organizations create. So is the organization fair? And by that, that could mean fair in terms of pay. It could mean fair in terms of car parking. There's lots of different ways a business can be fair or unfair. But if a business is fair, people are more likely to go the extra mile for that business. If leaders are seen to make decisions where they're taking into consideration other people, then even if that decision is uncomfortable, people still tend to try and go the extra mile for that leader. Because if that leader is doing things which maybe not so good for the leader, but are good for the team or good for the organization, people respect that and will go the extra mile for them. So there's a range of different reasons why that happens.
Yeah. And did you find that when you were doing these talks and things, were you talking to companies thinking, wow, you need to really do something about your disability policy, or you need to do something about this or that? Do you find yourself kind of gauging them all?
So, I mean, most organizations need to have a long, hard look at themselves around how they employ disabled people, for sure. I think, we spent decades suggesting that we couldn't employ disabled people because of our crumbling infrastructure. Oh, the doors aren't wide enough. There isn't a ramp.
Yeah.
And then when we all work from home during COVID,
Yep.
actually, people don't need to get into the office. You'd think there would be a massive uptick
Yeah.
on the fact of employing people who struggle to get into a physical location. But in actual fact, disabled people were further negatively impacted. They
Why
were
do you
the
think
first
that
people
is?
to get, well, they were the first people to get laid off when, so I think we need to give a long, hard look at ourselves in terms of how we consider disability.
Yeah.
Um, when I go though to corporate organisations, I'm very interested and passionate about equal opportunities for people with disabilities, but my real passion is around team dynamics and behaviours. So I tend to get invited to talk about whether a team can be more functional, whether it can be a high performing team. How can a team be more effective? And that's where I tend to think there's a few things that you can maybe do as an organisation to improve how this team operates. And then I try to find the right moment to share that with the appropriate people.
And so from that, you started being an executive coach. I want to know exactly what an executive coach is.
Okay. So I kind of fell into this as I've done into a lot of things that I've done. I fell into this because I was doing an awful lot of corporate speaking. Like I said, about 100 a year. And when you go and do a presentation at a big event, it's a little bit like being a vicar at a wedding. And what I mean by that is, you've got something important to say, everybody listens, and afterwards you get to sit next to somebody important. Now, the vicar sits next to the father of the bride, or whoever, and I get to sit next to the chief executive or the CFO or whoever the senior person is. And because of the fact that I've met hundreds and hundreds of these senior executives over the years, a percentage of them wanted to stay in touch, and I would stay in touch, and they'd say, "Hey, Mark, can we go out for a coffee? I've got this thing I want to run by. I've got this thing I'm trying to deal with. Because senior people, the higher you get, the less people there are for you to talk to.
Yeah, right.
For you to admit that you're not sure, or that you're still trying to work something out is not a done thing." So I found that I was having these informal coaching conversations where I was going out for dinner with somebody, and afterwards I'd be like, was that a coaching conversation? Where I'm asking
questions. For that.
Well, and I thought, well, that's okay because I get paid a premium rate as a speaker.
Yeah.
But after a while, I began to think it'd be good to explore that a bit more, and really that saved me when COVID happened and the event industry, was decimated.
Yeah.
By then I was already doing more formalized executive coaching, and a lot of my clients are in the US, and so I was already doing that by video links anyway. So that sustained me through COVID. So yes, I got a qualification, and I do a lot of executive coaching. Normally, people in big global organizations, kind of what they call C-suite, chief operating officer, chief financial officer, that kind of level, or what they call C-1. It's the level below.
And so you meet up with them, you talk to them, you literally help them through the problems in their working life or their life. Is this how it works? So
what tends to happen is I'll get contracted to look after a team because I've got that team dynamic background, and I will coach a whole group of people, and we'll define with the senior leader or the sponsor, so maybe the chief executive or the chief HR officer, will say, this is what we're trying to achieve with this team. We want them to travel in that direction. And so when I'm coaching them, I've got some guardrails of where we're traveling.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about or listening to, which is the thing that they don't get much of, is the listening to whatever their current challenge is. And so I encourage people to come and bring something that they're trying to work on. They're dealing with a difficult person that reports into them, or they're chewing something over that is not fully formed, and then I help them that become fully formed more expediently, I guess, is, I'm just trying to get them to a better outcome quicker.
Yeah. So what would you do using all of this kind of experience that you've got if you got asked by the government to say what changes, and we're talking about a hypothetical government here that would actually do something, what changes would you like to see a government bring about in disability rights, and how do you think equality could be achieved? I know that's a huge ask, but if I was going
Blimey,
to
Lucinda, what a question.
if I've ever become Prime Minister, Mark, obviously I'll ask you to do
You'll get me. Okay, I hadn't realised you were working towards that, but yes, I'm happy to get involved. I think there's still a need to actually ask disabled people what they need, what the challenges are. There's the old phrase, "Nothing about us without us." I don't think we do that very well, particularly around disability. I think we've got much better at doing that around gender. We don't have so much mansplaining now as we used to. We still do, but not as much.
Yeah.
We're better around that, around sexual orientation. We're better around that, around ethnicity. We're not so good around that, around disability. Part of the challenge of that is because the opportunities are so poor that the number of people that come through to a certain level, with a level of education or understanding or corporate experience or political experience, the numbers are just so low. So there's some challenge around that. So I think it's got to be nothing about us without us is the first thing. I think we need to have a really long, hard think about the difference between diversity and inclusion. I think we're still caught up in a tick box world where we have a quota of a proportion of women, a proportion of ethnic minorities, whatever the quota is.
Yeah.
We need to focus more on inclusion. If we were truly inclusive, it would be good for everybody. And when I say inclusion, there's bound to be somebody listening thinking, well, I'm a white male, it's all right for you to say we need to be more inclusive. Don't be so ridiculous, is my response to that. Well, I'm talking about inclusion for everybody, so that everybody is included in the things that they should be included in the decisions that are made on their behalf. So, in fact, I've got another book coming out, Lucinda.
Have you? Well, tell us about this book.
So this book is written with a couple of other people. Will come out in January 2024. It's called Inclusion Unlocked. And it does explore how to create those environments where people do feel included, so you can get the best out of people, so that people can bring different life experiences to help you make better decisions, rather than trying to make a decision about somebody who actually know nothing about how they live, what it means to be, let's say for me, what it means to be a female Asian Muslim woman in Leicester. I should not be making decisions about that. There should be people involved in the conversations to help engage those female Muslim women in Leicester into physical education or whatever it is that they want to get engaged into.
Yeah. I've noticed very gradually we're getting more and more disabled actors on TV. Well, I say more and more. We're getting a trickle more of disabled actors. Do you think that is hopefully the thin end of the wedge and that it will start to get better? Or do you think this is just something that's just happening now because it's particularly trendy at the moment? I mean, have you noticed a change yourself?
Well, there's definitely a change. And you see it in a variety of places, don't you? See in adverts. I mean, I saw a big shift at London 2012. Going in, I can remember walking through Olympic Park, and there was a sponsor of the Olympic and Paralympic Games. Other burgers are available, and I can remember seeing branding and some toys with wheelchair athletes in them, and young kids in wheelchairs picking them up and going, "Oh my God,
yeah,
that's like me." Now that kind of shift is huge. It's huge, and so yes, we are seeing it. It has become more trendy, I suppose. Is it the thin end of the wedge? I'd like to think. I think there's still plenty more we could be doing. If you think that 15% of society is disabled, across every nation. That's the approximate. It's an approximate number. There's a
There's
movement.
nothing like that representation in public life at all. 15%.
No, it doesn't. You don't see it in public life at all.
Wow.
And we're still a long way off seeing that in public life and on TV. Am I saying that we have to make sure there's 15% in every program? No, I'm not. I'm just saying let's be a little bit more real about how we show things, and let's engage with people in a better way. And I think the thing that frustrates me most about disability is the arrogance of the majority of people who aren't disabled, the other 85% who aren't disabled, because you know what, you're likely to end up in that 15%. If you are lucky enough to live long enough, you are likely to end up in that 15%. So I haven't quite, I'm sure there's been some amazing studies on the psychology behind this, and whether it's people just don't want to face up to the fragility of human nature, and so they're kind of anti it until they're in it. Yeah. I don't know what it is. But
I remember being absolutely flabbergasted when my father was in a wheelchair, and he really wanted to go to an event that was being held at the RAF club in London, so a military club. How many wounded veterans are there? And after the event, there was a thing in the bar. The bar was in the basement, and the lift was not big enough for a wheelchair. What is the point in even building a lift that won't take a chair? And I just thought, how can this be? I know it's a listed an ancient building, but there must be a way, or get a ramp or something. And I thought, well, if that's the military, and that is, the area where there must be a much higher proportion of disabled members than any other club, it just seemed to me insane. And that was probably the big eye-opening moment for me of, oh my God, we're useless as a society when it comes to this.
And those kind of things, if we were to improve just access, let's take access, physical access. If we were to improve it so that wheelchairs could access more things, it wouldn't just help wheelchair users. It would help people delivering things with trolleys. It would help parents with pushchairs. It would help an awful lot of people. Victorian times are a long time ago, as you well know, Lucinda.
Yes.
and we should be able to keep improving, but it's slow. It's a slow grind.
Yeah, it is incredible, really, and there just needs to be a huge change about it. Goldster is all about older people, so I was just wondering if you've got any advice, obviously you were very young when you did it, but having come back a second time now, regaining your fitness after your second cancer diagnosis. For those people that you've probably talked about who are in that 85%, who have spent their whole lives perhaps fit and healthy, perhaps haven't thought about sport that much because they haven't had to, what would you suggest to anybody who is perhaps discovering that they've got disabilities or lowering abilities they ever had before, but are thinking, I want to stay healthy? How do I start getting into sport, or how do I take up a sport that's less challenging than the one I was used to that I can't do anymore?
Yeah, I would broaden it out, beyond sport. Obviously, physical activity is important for everybody, but I think the important thing is when you're having one of those shifts in your life where you realise you're not quite what you used to be, which seems to be continually happening when you get past a certain point. I think that the important thing is to focus not on the things you suddenly can't do. It's to think about the things that you can still do and enjoy doing those things. I think it's very easy to get blinded by the fact that you can no longer run a marathon, or you can no longer, walk as far, but you can still do other things. You could still maybe go swimming. You could still, you can still go and see your friends, but you might not do it in the same way as you used to do. And I think it's about being smart about looking for the opportunities and not dwelling on the misfortune and the negatives. I would say that to anybody of any age.
Yeah, Brilliant. Thank you. That's really helpful. It has been such a joy to interview you today, Mark. I've really, really enjoyed it. And good luck with everything that you're doing now. And if anybody here needs any executive coaching, you know who to go to. So I think your website is Mark, and it's Mark with C. Just remember that. markwoods.com. Is that correct?
That is correct. Thank you.
Yeah, brilliant. So thank you so much for coming along today. It's been great. Really enjoyed it. Wishing you lots of good luck with whatever you're doing next, and particularly with the new book. Do you want to name check it one more time?
Inclusion Unlocked.
Brilliant. Thank you. We've already got a comment here saying very motivating. So here you are. It's worked. That motivational speaker is still there.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
So I'm now just going to tell everybody what is coming up on Goldster. So Humphrey is back with you later this week on Book Club. He is going to be talking on Thursday to J.R. Seeger, retired senior intelligence service officer who was with the CIA for more than 20 years. Going to be a really, really fascinating interview. And then he's back again on Friday with Alex Gurlis, author and expert on espionage, who has a new book out called Agent in the Shadows. And then next week, I am super excited that I'm doing a Goldster Live. I don't know, I think there might be a couple of tickets left, but I'm not sure. Joe would have to tell you that, with Bonnie Greer. God, I'm seriously excited and actually so starstruck, I can't tell you. So I'm going to be talking to Bonnie Greer. It's going to obviously be on Zoom as always and available on the podcast afterwards at Riverstone in London. And she's just phenomenal. If you haven't read her autobiography, I'd seriously recommend it. And her novel as well. It's Hanging by Her Teeth. And then I shall be back again online on Friday, the 17th of November, talking to Lee Jackson, who is the author of Dickens Land. And he's also a general Victorian expert. And just to remind you all that Book of the Month this month is with Humphrey, last Friday of the month, as always. And this is Richard Barks' Jonathan Livingston Seagull, which if you haven't read, or if you haven't read it for a long time, it's a super easy read. It's very, 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 very thin, but it's a really fascinating book. And please do come back again for PPG next Tuesday, when you will have Alistair. Alistair will be talking to, I know I'm going to say this wrong. It's Humphrey next Tuesday. So it's Billy Kulke from Let's Zep. So we're going musical next Tuesday. And then the Tuesday after that, Tuesday 21st of November, is Claire Rucastle. So all information is on the Goldster website. Do check it out. And I shall see you all next Thursday, but Humphrey will be with you this Thursday and Friday. Take care, everybody. And thank you for your lovely messages coming in. What a motivational man. It made me feel positive, made me feel better and more positive. There you are, Mark. That's what you needed to do. Thanks so much, everyone. And thank you, Joe. And I will see you all soon. Take care. Bye.